Hi everyone, and welcome to the first of our series in our conference around taking action or ticking boxes, and obviously that's to do with sustainable development goals. We're delighted to have you all here. Before we get started, just a little bit of guidance to remind you how we like to engage around our online sessions. The session is being recorded, so that people can access it at a later stage or date. We would ask you during the presentations to turn off your microphones and your cameras to reduce the bandwidth pressure. Please feel free to use the chat function as we're going along to ask any questions. We have people manning the chat. We will be putting live captions on, which are available. The closed captions are available within the 48 hours. And we would ask you just to be respectful. We have a range of people joining us today from all over the globe. So we're really keen that there is active engagement and that you take part in the conversations, but that these are also respectful. So we want some active listening. We want some engagement with the presentations and hopefully raises a few questions. So we don't want to take too long, and you don't want to take too long listening to me. So without delaying much further, I'd like to introduce Professor Zoe Robinson. So Professor Zoe Robinson is Professor of Sustainability in Higher Education from Keele University. And today she's going to be talking about response and responsibility, the role of universities, the curriculum and student partnership in a more sustainable future. So we are delighted to have you with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. Now, for those of you joining us to listen, Zoe's going to talk for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we will have time for questions, which will take us up to 3 o'clock. And then we're going to enter the second half of our conference today after a short break, but we'll update you on that at 3 o'clock. So Zoe, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you all. And even better, thank you so much for turning up to listen to what I and others have to talk to you about today. So let me share my screen with you. Hopefully that is working. So yes, it's a long title, and I have got a lot of things that I want to cover over this next 45 minutes or so, but I really also want to make sure that I have time for questions at the end. So my name is Zoe Robinson. I've been at Keele for a very long time. Keele University, as you see there, is slap bang in the middle of England, really, if you don't know where it is. And I have, for the past 10 years, I've had a role as the university's Director of Education for Sustainability. And in that role, I have had responsibility for embedding sustainability in the curriculum and the wider student experience. So that's been alongside normal sort of academic responsibilities. I am now the university's director for our Institute for Sustainable Futures, which is a cross-university, predominantly research institute this time, but also linking in with education. So basically, I have sustainability after my title in lots of different ways. So we know that there are lots of societal challenges, and often we quite glibly say education is the answer. But is it? What do we mean by education? This is one of my favourite quotations. I'm going to read it to you in full. It is worth noting that the destruction of the planet is not the work of ignorant people. Rather, it is largely the results of work by peoples with BAs, BScs, etc. Education can equip people to be more effective vandals of the earth. If one listens carefully, it may even be possible to hear the creation groan every year in late May when another batch of smart, degree-holding but ecologically illiterate Homo sapiens who are eager to succeed are launched into the biosphere. So what David Orr is saying here is that actually our education systems are as much to blame for actually the current sustainability crises that we face. And therefore, we need to look long and hard at our education systems and at our higher education systems. There's also another angle that I think that we should consider. So a lot of our students come to university, fair enough, because they think they'll get a degree and they will earn more money. And indeed, the stats suggest that graduates continue to benefit from higher earnings. But actually, there's actually quite a strong link between wealth and between emissions. And actually, the richest 10% of the world is responsible for half of the total lifestyle consumption emissions. So we're creating wealthier, probably more emitting graduates through our work. But also, the future leaders, our future leaders, are at university now. So they say that 3% of people attend university, but they take up 80% of leadership positions. So this is the last chance to give our future leaders a sustainability lens to look at the world through. And we're used to, in higher education, thinking about the employability of our graduates, preparing them for the world of work. But actually, shouldn't we also be thinking about preparing our students for the work of the world? So, we have a responsibility as educators, as people who work within higher education. We have a responsibility here. And there is urgency. We know that we are living in a climate emergency. If you've seen any of the headlines over the past couple of days, we are seeing heat waves at both the North and South Pole. The climate scientists are saying we have entered a new extreme phase of climate change earlier than expected. We are in an emergency. And these are the impacts that we are seeing around the world from climate change at just a 1.1 or 1.2 degree rise since pre-industrial times. We see flooding across the world, locally here in Malaysia. We see extreme heat, and that extreme heat is in places that we might view as hot, the Middle East, but also in the Pacific Northwest. The bottom left picture is a cooling station in Canada. This looks like a disaster movie. This was last year during a heat wave in North America. And bottom right, we saw last year so many images around the world with intense wildfires. And we hear that the intensity and the frequency of wildfires is greater than we had been projecting from our climate models. So this is what we're seeing. And this isn't an environmental issue. This is affecting people's lives. These are social, economic, cultural, political issues in terms of the causes of climate change, but also the impacts. But of course, it's not just climate change that we need to contend with, that we need to prepare our students to deal with. We have huge problems in terms of our resource use, our waste management, inequality within countries and between countries. We have problems around food security, access to food in our own countries. And the bottom right represents probably one of the biggest challenges that we have, is that we have so few images and visions of a positive, sustainable future. If we don't have those positive visions, how are we going to work towards it? So, of course, we're all now, familiar with this graphic here of the Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals, 169 targets, all that can contribute for everybody to make the world a better place. But that demographic suggests to us that all of these goals are in isolation. But of course they're not. They are all absolutely interconnected. And probably the worst thing that we can do is try and deal with any of these single goals in isolation. Timescales. Severity of issues. So we are much better at dealing with things which are immediately in front of us. For example, COVID-19. We reacted to that. We saw changes in our lives that we didn't think that we would see. But actually, has that been to the detriment of considering the other bigger waves of concern behind. Climate change can often seem a long way away, both in space and time. A lot of climate models go up to 2100 and then they stop. 2100 seems a long time away. Net zero by 2050 is our goal. That can seem a long time away. So let's try and bring those timescales closer. If we imagine that our first year students that we're teaching today, they finish, they have a year off, they start their careers in 2025. Let's say that they work for 40 years. That's going to see them retiring in 2065. Their whole career will see them through this net zero transition and beyond. Imagine our first year students, that they have children and that their children start their careers in 2055. Let's say they then work for 45 years. Well, they will be retiring in 2100. So our students' children, maybe our grandchildren, will be retiring at the end of this century. This is not that far away at all. So let's try and bring these timescales closer to us. So our students will make this transition happen and they will live with the impacts. And we absolutely are in this critical decade for action. So I would very much argue that as people working in higher education, we do have a moral responsibility to prepare our students for the transition ahead and to be part of that transition. But it isn't only a moral responsibility. There is also clearly demand from our student population. So this is a study which has been carried out for over 10 years now by what was the National Union of Students and is now called the Students Organising for Sustainability. And over 10 years, they've done a national survey about skills generally, but within that survey, they've asked some specific questions about views around sustainable development. And the statistics then over this, this survey over 10 years, lots of data points, says 91% of students say they agree that their place of study should actively incorporate and promote sustainable development. So this is something that we need to be embedding in every part of our university. 84% of students would like to see sustainable development actively incorporated and promoted through all courses. So our students are saying that, yeah, they want this, they want to see this happening through all the courses. And of course, there's also lots of other activity of young people actively championing for more sustainability within education systems, whether that's in the school system or university systems. And we see students out on the street and young people out on the street saying that they care about these issues as well as wanting to see it reflected in their places of education. But it's not just the students. Employers want this. We've seen how close this sustainability net zero transition is. All employers are having to grapple with these issues. Every job is and will be a green job. Everybody has to understand how this relates to their place of work and their professions. So we are also addressing our employability goals as a university if we address sustainability. And of course, this all then leads to what I would like to think is the most important target of the Sustainable Development Goals, if it was a competition. And this is target 4.7 under quality education, a goal which underpins all other goals, which is in making sure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development. And this is what the field of education for sustainable development is all about. And there's some very useful guidance and resources out there to support people working in this area. And just to sort of look at this quote from this guidance from Advanced HE and the QAA. It's saying society is facing a future that looks entirely different to what has gone before, and that needs to be reflected in our higher education systems. Our education sector has a key role to play in this. So that is what we are trying to achieve through education for sustainable development, to really help shape our higher education systems to address these challenges. So education for sustainable development is about empowering learners to take informed decisions and responsible actions for the breadth of sustainability issues. I love this part of the definition, which says it achieves its purpose by transforming society. And actually, that's what can get me up in the morning, is thinking the work that I do is ultimately about transforming society for the better. And so ESD is about supporting our students and staff to develop the knowledge, competencies and ability to pursue sustainable visions of the future. It's about supporting students and staff to appreciate the complexity of our world, its wicked problems that emerge, and how they can contribute to positive change across the personal and professional spheres. And it's about challenging, supporting and enabling students and staff to co-design solutions and drive change for sustainability. And we can do so much of this within our jobs. This document very much talks about thinking around a competency approach for sustainability and the skills and the competencies that our students need to develop in order to be able to contribute to these societal challenges, whether this is systems thinking competencies, future thinking or anticipatory competencies, critical thinking, strategic competencies, collaboration, integrated problem solving, self-awareness and awareness of others and other perspectives, but all understood within the context of sustainability and sustainability challenges. So education for sustainable development, it's very easy to sort of take an approach of going, oh, it's yet another thing that we have to add into all of the things we're supposed to do. But it's not a separate agenda. It's a whole approach to look at everything else that we do. It links with all of these other agendas that we're all used to working within. And critically there, we have one of those areas of students as partners. And that is very much the focus that I now want to go on to look at. And so thinking about the journey of our students through our educational institutions. Again, it's very easy to think about students just learning from the formal curriculum. When I wrote my job description as the Director of Education for Sustainability, I was very keen to make sure that it was around responsibility for embedding sustainability in the curriculum and the wider student experience. Because our students don't just learn from the formal curriculum and what they're taught, they learn from the co-curriculum and the opportunities that they have to get involved in different activities. But they also learn from the hidden or the subliminal curriculum. What are the implicit messages that they are taking away from the environment in which they are living and studying? And so when we think about education for sustainable development within our universities, we should be thinking about all of the whole student journey and the whole student experience within our institutions. It's also very easy to take an approach and say, well, I can see this link between my discipline and this bit of sustainability. So that's great, I'm doing it. I'm ticking that box, I'm doing it. But really, we should be asking ourselves critically about whether our students are gaining a very holistic and broad understanding of sustainability from their curriculum and how it links to their curriculum and professional lives. And so previous guidance on education for sustainable development included the sort of pillars of global citizenship, environmental stewardship and social justice. And we carried out some work, this is back in 2015, asking our students from sort of different discipline areas what bits of sustainability they felt were relevant to them. And I thought there were some quite striking things to take away from this, such as our health students didn't see the relevance of environmental stewardship. And yet we know the NHS has a huge environmental footprint, but also there are such strong links between environmental issues, is it really environmental, something like climate change, and health. Many health practitioners are saying that climate change is the biggest issue in the future for health. And yet our health students weren't seeing that. And so that then helps us identify a gap, you know, in ensuring that actually we're not just doing the easy bits, the social justice, global citizenship, which has traditionally been in the curriculum, but we're really looking at sustainability in a broad way. Similarly, you know, I'm slightly concerned that our natural scientists, well, actually, they're not really seeing the relevance of many aspects of sustainability. But, you know, it would really worry me if our natural science students were graduating and they didn't see the relevance of their work to social justice. So we need to view these as, motorbike going past, we need to view sustainability and ensure that it's covered in a holistic way within our work with students. Okay, I will now go on to say a bit more about some specific examples of work that we have been doing at Keele University. So just to give a bit of a time scale, we've probably had a bit of a sustainability focus as a university since around 2008, when our council sort of made a conscious decision, recorded, minuted, that we would follow as a university a deep green path in everything that we do, including our use of our campus. A critical sort of moment was probably actually creating a role, giving someone responsibility for trying to embed sustainability within the education activities of the university. Now, fortunately, I had that role. I think that the crucial thing was the making of that role, giving legitimacy for someone to go and have these conversations with people, making staff realise that this was something that was expected of them. We also made sustainability one of our key strategic aims, one of 6. Unfortunately, that isn't our strategic plan anymore, but I still like to refer to that one. Apparently, we don't need to have it as a key strategic aim anymore because we're doing it. Bit of a shame. And so, but these have been key sort of moments where we've been, as a university, really sort of trying to make the case that this is important. And leading to this approach where I like to think about having a Trojan mouse of sustainability, which it scuttles into lots of different parts of the university, leaving little sustainability messages / droppings around, and some of those droppings will fertilise over time. And so we haven't really taken an approach of going, this is our big flagship sustainability project and putting a load of resource into it. It's been much more of a trying to embed sustainability into everything that is going on. And my job, I've very much seen, has been trying to keep an ear to the ground, to listen in to what is happening, to understand what changes are happening, what new policies are coming, because it's much easier to get the change that you want when you stick it onto change which is already happening. And the other key element to our approach is communication. And we work really hard to ensure that sustainability is consistently communicated at a high level, so that every year when our Vice-Chancellor does his State of the Nation address to the whole university, we make sure that sustainability is a key part of that messaging, as well, of course, as lots of other ways too. And so I'm very much a fan, not of thinking that we need to sort of bring all of this stuff together and we need to know what's going on. The thing that makes me happiest is when I suddenly learn that a colleague in another bit of the university has been driving some amazing sustainability activity. And that's much better than it all being centralised, in my view. But we can try and seed that activity through these different approaches. The other thing that's really important to me is to make sure that we don't ever see education in its own silo. And, you know, I hate this division between research and education, which seems to be sort of being driven in many of our institutions, because there are really strong synergies between what we're trying to achieve in our education work, with our research, with our outreach and partnerships, and through our campus. And so actually, education for sustainable development should be intertwined through all of those three other aspects as well. So let's move on to talking a bit more about partnerships with students. So one of the things I'll start by saying is that the curriculum is important, and the curriculum has not just obviously a role in terms of you embed sustainability in it and all students might sort of get that coverage. But the curriculum can be really important in terms of seeding ideas for students to take away and drive and empower them to do other things. So, for example, for about 13 years, we've run a module called Greening Business, Sustainability and Employability. There we are. I thought I'd get some buzzwords in when I wrote that module specification. I was lucky to get a bit of external funding to make it happen. And it's a module which is available to all first-year students in the university. And the reason that it has a business focus, my thinking was that if all of our students will hopefully go on to work in some way, sustainability is relevant to all places of work, and therefore this is a module where we can make these clear links going sustainability is relevant to you. And so we've run this module for, say, 13 years. A key part of it is our students work in partnership with some of our internal teams, so our environmental manager, our head of grounds. They've also worked with our bookshop, with our events and catering head on different sustainability projects. And the students, they go away, they research, they make recommendations back to our professional staff in the university. Now, what we then were sort of hearing from students was actually they'd really enjoyed doing that, but it was a first year level, and there's only so much that they felt they could achieve when they were in their first year, but they wanted something in the third year. And so that led us to develop another module called Sustainability Consultancy, which is basically greening business, but now students work in groups with external partners on external partner-led projects. And it was brilliant. This morning I had a group of my students who've been working with a fuel poverty charity. They produced a report, and the charity thought it was so good that they wanted them to present those results to this local warmer homes partnership with about 80 different individuals and organisations. So real win-wins are possible. Our students are learning from real people, real organisations, real projects, and putting their time into something which can make a real difference to organisations. But actually, one of the most important things that the Greening Business module has done in the past has empowered students to think that they can drive change, as well as develop their reflective thinking and self-awareness and their collaboration skills. One of our other sort of key approaches is to try to never say no to a student. If a student comes to myself and the very small team that I used to have, currently vacant positions, if students come to us and say that they have an idea around a sustainability project, we really don't want to say no, because that is the most disempowering thing that they could have at this point in their lives. So we really try and support their ideas. And one such idea came about 12 years ago, the first cohort of students studying a brand new degree called Environment and Sustainability. And so this degree brought together students who are passionate about sustainability. They'd often had to fight against people who said they should be doing a more traditional subject. They found themselves, and ideas are being catalysed. And ideas were being catalysed through the Greening Business module. And this group of students came to myself and a colleague, and they said that they didn't feel they could live as sustainably as they would like to in university halls, halls of residence. And so they wanted to turn one of the small bungalows on campus that housed 4 people. They wanted to turn one of these bungalows into an exemplar of sustainable student living, and to use that to explore sustainable living themselves, but also to help educate other students as well. So we supported the students to lobby the university to get this project off the ground, and amazingly, the university said yes. And so this is a project which has now been running for 12 years with 4 new students every year in the Sustainable Student Bungalow. They've built raised beds, they've got funding and built a polytunnel. They do a lot around sort of communal eating and sort of vegan sort of food. They also are often a sort of a hub for other sort of conversations around sustainability. And those conversations have led to other projects. So another year, a group of students said that they were sort of frustrated that they couldn't get access to organic veg easily on campus. And for us, it's it's a bus ride down into town to get to a supermarket. And so these students came up with the idea of setting up their own organic local fruit and veg bag scheme. So effectively they set up their own social enterprise, which they did, and it ran for a number of years. They wanted to expand into also selling dried goods, and that idea of selling dried goods eventually transformed into actually a permanent installation of our zero waste shop, which sits within the Students' Union. Another initiative which has been sparked off by students is our Great Donate, which again has been running for a good few years. And this really came about from some illegal skip diving students who were just, again, they were frustrated by the fact that they were seeing skips in the university with things in them that they just felt shouldn't be there. And that they started to collect things out of skips. That then led to them kind of lobbying the environmental manager to set up a scheme to collect food, kitchen equipment, clothes that students would normally just have dumped at the end of the academic year, and to then make those items either available through food banks immediately or available to new students coming in the next year. So really sort of helping particularly international students who've travelled with one suitcase and need to restock, but they don't need to go and buy a load of cheap new stuff, because actually we're able to provide through what has been collected the previous year. So again, another example, absolutely sort of student initiated, because they were frustrated, but they also felt empowered and then supported to really drive change, which have then become part of the university structures. So we also work very closely with the Students' Union. One of the schemes that we've sort of set up, and it sort of died a bit during COVID, and we're trying to sort of re-establish, is a sustainability staff student voice rep scheme. So to sit alongside the usual staff student voice reps, with students formally reporting sort of back on their courses, to specifically train some students up around sustainability, so that they could sort of understand how to look at sustainability in their curriculum and their experience, and then to feed that back and to demand more if that's what the demand was. We also do a lot of work with the Students' Union around raising awareness around sustainability issues and making sure that it continues not to be thought of as just recycling. And this is involved, we always work with the new sabbatical officers, although increasingly we don't need to because they just come sort of so engaged in this area. We provide sustainability training for all of the student society committees. We do sustainability training for all of the student voice reps. We embed it within the induction materials that students get. And there's also been a sustainability stripes scheme for societies who could do specific sustainability actions to get a sustainability stripe. Another of the things we try and do is make sure that we celebrate the action of our students. And actually, I was just trying to bring this together. There's another student who I haven't actually added on here. But over the past sort of 5 or 6 years, a lot of our students have actually won or been recognised in national awards for their activism. And I'm so proud of the fact that our students are real activists in this area. Now, all of this, it all might sound great. It comes with its challenges. And to be honest, I get a bit bored of just sort of talking about all the positive things. We also need to talk about the challenges. So, there have been real tensions for students over time. The students who set up the Kiel Food Co-op, they were definitely not going to classes because it was taking up so much of their time. We've also had issues of different student factions, internal politics that inevitably arise around, any community sort of driven activity. There's also issues around the private versus the public sphere of student life. So the Sustainable Student Bungalow project, for me, wow, this is an amazing project. Oh, amazing research project. Oh, it'd be really interesting to find out more about how your purchasing habits have changed. Our students told us pretty quickly they didn't want any of that. And actually that made me realise that this was their private lives rather than a public project. And so managing sometimes those tensions between the public and the private in students' lives in universities, I think is really important and something we should talk and think about more. There's also always issues around continuation and student transience. Our students aren't here long. They set up amazing schemes and then they leave, and new students, they might have new ideas that they want to take forward. There's also, a challenge of what are our students learning and taking away from this? How do we help them reflect to truly learn and not just take action? Then we've also had a real challenge about the impact of COVID. We've really lost our student community over COVID times. And it's now, it's a challenge for new students to connect with others who are interested in this area. So we're having to step in again as a university and try and create those spaces to help the students find each other, to catalyse these conversations and ideas. There's always a challenge of moving beyond the usual suspects to make sure that it's not just environmental students who are driving these activities. And of course, there is also challenges around staff time and, I'm sorry to say, sometimes staff attitudes towards students and, sometimes a jadedness of what our students might do. There are, of course, real solutions to these and, as long as we're aware of the challenges, we can work with them. So thinking about how we can embed some projects into university practices, for example, the Great Donate, the Way to Go shop, student catalyse, they are a permanent legacy of what our students did. We need to try and empower our students through the curriculum, give them those opportunities to meet each other, to catalyse ideas. We need to help them develop intuitive, reflective practices through the curriculum. We need to work with existing structures and societies. So going to different societies to try and help them embed sustainability in a broad way. We need to celebrate the action of our students. We need to be respectful and sensitive to them. And sometimes we just need, as staff, to let go and let students just run with things or just to drop things and realise that some projects, they just have a finite life, but something new will come along. So I really like to advocate this idea around activist learning, encouraging and empowering our students to be activists in their lives, in their universities, and through doing that, they will develop this range of competencies. And so at this point, I would like to really make a call to action. So first of all, sustainability is not. It is not primarily an environmental issue. I'm, by background, a geographer, an environmental scientist, and I actually spend most of my time now trying to say to people, these aren't environmental issues. Because I think for too long, we've seen some of these issues, they've been labelled as environmental issues, and that has allowed people to go, oh, that's those people over there, that's their concern. Actually, they're not environmental issues, they're social, political, cultural issues. There is a role for environmental scientists, but we all need to embrace these. So sustainability is not primarily an environmental issue. It is not, I think, a political ideology. Discuss. It is not distant from us in time. It is not distant from us in space. So many of the impacts, those images I showed were from around the world. I could just as easily have brought up a whole range of images from our own country as well. And so education, addressing sustainability through education is a moral necessity, I believe. It is urgent. It is complex. It is fast moving. It is exciting. It's not just through the formal curriculum. It is linked to other educational agendas that we're already engaged in. And it is our responsibility as educators. And so we should, as individuals, inform ourselves, keep informing ourselves. We need to keep learning about this. I know my thinking is constantly developing. My narratives around this are constantly developing as I continue to learn and think. We need to be willing to change as individuals. We need to change what we do, change how we think. We need to be willing to collaborate, not compete with each other. We need to think about our role and our responsibility and think about, why do we do what we do? What is our responsibility as educators? And so in our teaching, we need to focus on solutions rather than just focusing on problems. We need to embed action and activism into our teaching. We need to seek to empower our students. We need to not just tinker around the edges, and we need to say yes to student ideas. As researchers and scholars, we need to make our research accessible. We need to work with our local communities. We need to integrate our students into this work, and we need to link our students to real projects and partners. And as institutions, we need to allocate appropriate time and workloads to support active partner-led education. We need to change our governance and strategy, and we need to strive to be the leaders that we say we are. And we need to make it everybody's responsibility. So I love the fact that this conference has the strapline of SDGs. How do we know if we are taking action or ticking boxes? So how do we know? Well, we need to keep asking ourselves this question. We need to question our metrics of success, because probably what is important is not easy to measure. And so we shouldn't just be focusing on what is easy to measure. And we should value the impact on the individual as well. And think, yeah, if we have one individual student who is now thinking differently, doing things differently, then that has been worthwhile. And that will not be picked up in the metrics. And so I will leave you with my final quote. The science demands it. The evidence is before you. We must start at once. There is no time to lose. Thank you very much.
Zoe, That was amazing. Thank you so much. I have a million thoughts going around in my head. As a geographer myself, I cannot agree with you more about the comments you made about this not just being an environmental issue. I was also fascinated that you picked up on the tension between the private and the public life of students. Not something I'd given a lot of thought to, but so important, obviously, to come out in your work. Now, we have time for some questions. There is one that's come up in the chat that I'm just going to talk to first. And then if other people, either you can put your hand up, put your camera on if you'd like to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. So this first question is about students who take part in these initiatives. Are they generally all from one faculty, or do you find that it's a mix across the areas of discipline that you have at Keele?
A good question, and to be honest, I don't think it's one that we have cracked yet. In terms of a lot of the initiatives that I talked about were driven by students who are studying one of our environmental or sustainability focused courses. That said, there is a lot of activity driven by other students as well. So if we look at our medicine school, they have been very active in driving what's called the planetary health scorecard, completely sort of independently. And so, you know, as a group of students, they have driven things themselves. We've worked with nursing students who came back from placement, and suddenly, you know, this realization of the poverty that people were in, and she wanted to set up a beauty bank, and we helped her set that up, which ran for a number of years. And we work quite actively with a whole range of other societies. I don't think there's as much crossover between disciplines as there could be. And, you know, one thing that we are constantly sort of thinking about and trialing is how do we create those spaces to bring students from all different disciplines who are interested in these issues sort of together, and again, try and catalyse.
Oh, there we are.
That thinking.
Sorry, well, I certainly lost you for a bit there. I don't know if others did. Might just have been me. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask of Zoe? Oh, it was just me, apparently. That's because I'm on campus and the network's appalling. Any other questions that people would like to ask? Yes, Karen.
I have to keep on clicking buttons. Hi, Zoe, good to meet you. Having some experience of running student partnership projects, I wonder how you keep yourself motivated. I know that I have huge problems with keeping staff motivated because of that transient thing that you were talking about, that it's just constant, and it never gets to a stage where it runs itself. So how do you keep yourself motivated without, you know, drinking a lot?
Oh, it's a great question. I have to admit that yesterday I was having a bit of a grumpy day, and actually I found myself watching a Steve Jobs video, which was all about actually thinking about what we do and why we do it. And so I actually, you know, I talk a lot about saying we should think about our responsibility. And when I'm feeling grumpy, or you just go, oh, again, to really try and think about, actually, you know, it's a privilege to have our roles. We have a responsibility, but in some ways to celebrate the fact that we do have this constant sort of turnover of new students that we can work with, that we can learn from, and actually that real sense of sort of maternal pride that I get from my students when you see them develop, you see some of the fantastic things that they run, and you know, it's almost consciously just trying to make yourself think about some of those things, because it's exhausting, because you're right, there's a constant battle to keep things going, and this is why I also sort of think that just letting go sometimes is fine, and some projects, they have their time, and so let them go, and something else will grow in that space as well.
Thanks very much. Really, you're inspirational. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Karen, as well. Absolutely fabulous. And it sort of, I suppose, touches on that thing about between public and private as well, which I just haven't really thought about. Wei, you'd like to come in with a question?
Yeah, just a quick question about your sustainability modules you talked about. You said it's open to the whole university. Is it a lecture room based module teaching, or and how is like taking up of that module across the university?
Yeah, thanks. Really sort of practical question. It is open to the whole university. Doesn't mean they want to do it though. So it is, it has been face-to-face teaching. We've had probably our highest cohort has probably been close to 100. Probably tends to be more about 40. In reality, although it's open to all through an open elective system, it's mostly either geography environment students on the one hand or business students on the other hand, and the business students think it's too environmental and the environmental students think it's too businessy, which probably means it's about right, and there'll be a smattering of other students. But actually we're stopping that elective system, and we're actually moving to something called global challenge pathways, where students sign up to a pathway that they will follow at levels 1, 2 and 3. And we will have a pathway which is called Climate Change and Sustainable Futures, and that will actually largely be online, and we're expecting much higher numbers on those. But I think the problem is with online, it's much harder to create that community, and actually that is the important, it's providing those spaces for students to find each other and excite each other with ideas.
Yeah, we are thinking about, well, Claire knows, we are thinking about a major minor degree. So maybe that's similar to your pathway arrangement.
Yeah, I tried to establish a sustainability minor in 2016. We don't have one. I will not say anything more.
Yeah, I suppose, I wonder, how do you encourage activism through online?
Yeah, good question. I'll let you know, because our level 5 or second year module in this new global challenge pathway has a focus on activism, and so it will be based around trying to excite and empower students to really think about what matters to them. What do they want to see different? What frustrates them? And I think that's what's key to all of this sort of activism. It's where students they've been frustrated by something. They've seen something that they've wanted to change, but we've given them a bit more of a structure to make it happen beyond their illegal skip diving. So I think it can be done online. And actually, in a way, I'm aware that in my professional life, I am now collaborating with so many people online, and you can form relationships, and it is part of the professional world we now work in. So I actually think, helping our students to develop those skills and ability to do exciting stuff online, it's not a second best. Actually, we need to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Yes, and just as an observation, we have. We had 80 at one point, but we have 76 people on this presentation at the moment from all around the world. We would never have that reach or that input to our conversations and discussions before we adopted this type of approach to engaging around these important discussions. We have time for one more question before we take a break, before our second half. Are there any other comments or thoughts, observations or questions that people would like to make? I'm not seeing anything. Oh, yes, please come on in.
The student empowerment, is there some particular strategy to facilitate it, for example, in a curriculum or?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's that the curriculum is a really important place to do it. And, you know, for us, it's been sort of setting up projects. And so, you know, with first years, students, we've spoken to different sort of professional services around the university who've said, we would like this to be done. But then we give students the opportunity to sort of develop that a bit in the way that they're interested, so they're not just sort of responding to do this exactly. So kind of trying to, you know, scaffold a bit of them feeling that they are doing change and contributing to change and being listened to within the curriculum, I think can then make them think, they also then develop relationships with people in the university, you know, in the sort of other staff who they then feel that they can go to with their ideas. And so we can help make those connections and bridge, you know, that complete, as a student, you know, you have no idea who to talk to. So we can help bridge that through the curriculum as well.
Oh, thanks, Zoe. There's one more question in the chat, which we'll close with, if that's okay. A question about, would there be any scope to involve colleagues involved in digital technologies or media to contribute to ESD within or across modules?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, interestingly that you pick up on media, because I think that communication element is absolutely critical. I'm really delighted. I've just appointed someone as a deputy director in the institute that I run who's an expert in environmental communication. And I was like, oh, this is so important, as is understanding how to use digital technologies effectively. So, and it is the world that we work in. And so many, you know, coming at it as a geographer, environmental scientist, so many jobs actually involve some element of communication that we have thought that we don't need to embed within our curriculum. And I think this probably goes for every job that tends to, you know, so many jobs, a communication element, which we haven't traditionally thought is part of those professions, but it is. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. Thank
you, Zoe. That has been absolutely inspiring. My head is buzzing with the ideas because, as Wei pointed out, we're starting to think about some of these issues around sort of major minor pathways and where sustainable development goals sit for us as a university. So I have loads of I've written loads of notes.